Welcome, and thank you so very much for joining us today for another episode of Talking Cloud. Now, this is where we talk about anything cloud, everything cloud, all things cloud, no holds barred. And I mean, I always say, come on, tell me a type of computing today, really, that doesn't involve cloud some way, somehow. We're hard pressed to find it. Now, just the Gilligan man, no professor here, but I always get them. And man, I'm super excited today because my guest today is someone who I don't know at all. Fortunate through a persistent PR firm, she managed to get us connected. I want to run through quickly and lead off by saying thanks for your service, Collin. We appreciate it. He was a hydraulics journeyman and flying crew chief for the Air Force, and basically ran maintenance operations for a base in Germany. Immediately, you can just see there's an interesting pattern with this guy, founder, CEO. He's got this title multiple times, founder, co-founder. He's definitely serial entrepreneur, you can tell. He's today and has been now for 8.5 years, the founder and I suspect CEO of North Labs. And I'm excited to hear all about this because I'm also a huge believer that, if we'd have started out this journey 25, 30 years ago, completely opposite of the way we went about it, meaning instead of the perimeter, if you're on the inside, you're safe, no matter if it's a person, the data, whatever. If we would have started with that grain of wheat, that data, and then worked outside, it'd been a whole different world. And I know Collin's got some things to say. I'm excited to have the founder of North Labs, Collin Graves, with me today. Collin, hey, thanks, man, for coming on, and I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely, Grant. Pleasure. Glad we can make it happen.
So listen, I mean, I kind of just really quickly ran over it because I saw a pattern, and I just wanted to dive right in and talk with you because you sound like a very interesting professional. You've definitely just dove right in. So tell me about your journey. Tell me about what prompted you to be serial entrepreneur. And really, I'm interested in hearing about North Labs and how you look at data and where you are today.
For sure. Yeah, like you mentioned, my career started. My career's gone about as backwards as most people's can go. And I always tell people, I knew from a very early age that I wasn't going to work for anyone, and then I decided to join the biggest company on the planet in the Department of Defense.
That's so funny.
And yeah, I started as a hydraulics engineer there. Moved to flying crew chief, and then was attached to NATO Special Operations for the latter part of my career. So I had the distinct honor of being the least impressive person on an aircraft about 300 days a year in Africa, the Middle East, former Soviet bloc, you name it, flying with Navy SEALs and Marine Recon and Rangers and
wow.
Development Group and things like that. It was just to be around those people and learn from them, their mindset, their discipline, their dedication to their craft was really impactful for me. And it taught me a lot that translates into business today. But
operational functions, is that where you were at? I mean, what were you doing if you were with all them? Talk a little bit more. I'm just curious.
No, for sure.
Flying these people all around as they got deployed, but you were the guy making sure all the instruments were right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I started as a wrench turner on the B1, which, for those of you unfamiliar, the B1 is the most active aircraft since 9/11 in the
Yep.
US Air Force's fleet. It's also the least mission capable, which
Hmm.
means it's broken all of the time.
Wow.
And what a way to take a somewhat mechanically savvy teenager and throw him to the wolves, right? This is
Mm.
an aircraft that was designed to originally fly only 1,000 hours during the height of the Cold War.
Wow.
We took the first one in history during one of my deployments, over 10,000 hours. Now I believe they're at
Holy
20,000
moly.
hours.
Wow. Now
They're
we're
just,
talking about the stealth.
it's
Is
not the
that the
pan,
bomber?
it's not the pancake looking B2.
Okay.
The,
Okay.
the B1 is, it's very tall. It's got long legs. It's a very
Okay.
elegant gal.
Shows my
Um,
ignorance here.
it's got the largest payload of any bomber in the US Air Force's fleet, not the B-52, although shout out to my buff folks out there. But the B-1 is
Wow.
unique because it's capable of flying the speed of a bomber, but then it can sweep its wings back and it can fly over the speed of sound. So it's
Oh,
a
wow.
very capable transcontinental bomber. And
Wow.
what
So
an
that's
honor
the
to
one
serve
where the
on that.
wings shift actually.
Exactly. Yeah. So I
Wow.
worked on all of those components. It was driven primarily by hydraulics. So thrown to the wolves for sure. But then I got transitioned to Ramstein Air Base, much easier aircraft in the C-130J, Super Hercules. And that's when I became all systems qualified, became a flying crew chief, and was able to fly around, like you said, in support of these special operators.
Yeah.
I was responsible for the health of the aircraft, regardless of where in the world we were, regardless of the infrastructure, the security
Mm.
footprint, whatever that might be. My objective was to make sure that plane was safe
Yep.
and secure and well maintained at
Functioning.
all
Yep.
times. So
Yep. Yep. Wow.
sometimes in the middle of a jungle, sometimes on a well groomed airstrip, and everything in between, beaches, you name it. So it
Sounds
was
just like a technology company.
well, yeah, it was a little bit different, but like you said, I learned about the cloud very early on. I'm 17 years into this, and it was my father who sent me a Wall Street Journal article about how Amazon was going to begin leasing out data center space. And I don't come from a background like that. I was not a super computer savvy kid growing up, but for
Yep.
whatever reason, I thought I need to learn all I can about this. I think this is a big
Interesting.
idea. So
Interesting.
became one of the first 10 fully certified AWS folks in the world. Started my first company, Cloud CTO. We basically built Dropbox for construction companies back
Hmm.
before Dropbox was a thing, so they could
Right.
share large files
Yep.
in the field over 2G cellular. Obviously, I sold that business about 9 months before Dropbox really took force, thankfully, because I would have been out of business the next day.
Yeah.
And been doing it ever since. So I started North Labs after a 2-year non-compete. And today we really specialize in building ready-made analytics, automation, and machine learning solutions for industry-specific applications. So our two biggest industry verticals are manufacturing and industrial and higher education. So we
Hmm.
bring all of the tools, all of the people, all the process to the table for these groups so they don't need to figure out how to cobble together these solutions on their own. Pre-built data models, pre-built algorithms, we plug their data in and they're up and running with their data and
Okay.
analytics efforts in about
So,
45 days.
so you said higher education, university, college,
Yep.
and
Manufacturing, industrial.
so you definitely need to kind of round that one out. I mean, is it that there are so many similarities, or was it there that you had disciplines in those areas to expand? I mean,
It was a little bit of both. If you zoom out to 10,000 feet, ironically, those industries look fairly similar to each other. What I mean by that is they're both shaped like a bow tie. Now, what does that mean? In manufacturing, you have a ton of raw materials, you have a ton of supply chain. All of that has to get consolidated down through a production line
yeah,
and then expands back out into distribution and stocking
sales,
and things like that.
yep. I got you.
And higher ed is very similar. You have a huge admissions portal, a huge enrollment portal that gets whittled down into your accepted students, and then you have to nurture them along the production line, bit tongue in cheek,
to get
throughout
them out, to get them
correct, yeah, to get the
graduated.
finished product, and then the expansion on the other side is alumni donorship, and then having people go for advanced degrees and things like that. So it's the flow is very similar. It doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that for sure. I saw with regards to the high ed, I saw the get them to graduate. But it's interesting, the alumni, right? The donations, the funds, the fundraisers, the other activities that are so critical to our tuitions continuing to be exorbitant.
Exactly. And now obviously, well, right. I mean, but then you think about, for us, we have 7 distinct modules in higher ed, from enrollment to admissions. Retention is a huge issue within higher ed because it's never been easier to move schools and receive your transfer credit. So people don't feel as committed to a particular institution that they used to. So every organization out there is battling retention. And what do we know in business about keeping a customer versus getting a new customer? It's way more expensive to onboard a new customer than keep one.
If I remember the data correctly, because I saw this data, to sell something to someone who's already bought from you in the past, it's 20% of the cost. It's an 80% lift for a new customer.
Exactly.
And that's a huge thing that people don't understand. It's interesting. You'll appreciate this. So my brother for years was a purchasing agent for a big paper supply company, right? Pens, pencils, Pentel, everything you can imagine, paper, binders. I mean, all that stuff, right? And so purchasing agents of America, the association he was a member of. And I remember him telling me about a survey they did. And it was really remarkable because the number 2 reason that people changed suppliers was their salesperson died. The number 1 reason was customer service related, customer satisfaction related. So he and I used to joke and say, look, man, all you got to do is take care of your customers and not die.
Right.
And you'll have them forever. Mm-hmm. It's not that complex. But it's kind of, so now I want to understand more about, you talked about predefined modules. And so are you going in and finding out how and where where my data is? And then like I'm using Snowflake, or maybe you provide the platform, and then the subsequent analysis on that data to give me all the great stuff that I go, holy moly, I didn't know it was happening. Is that kind of the flow? Tell me about what you do more.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're in the fortunate position, when I worked on really productizing these services, I mean we, the broader team, we really wanted industry verticals that were immature, where the need was there, but there was complexity enough to where it sort of slowed things down.
And when you say immature, you're talking about immature from the standpoint of sophisticated data analysis.
That's correct. Absolutely. Okay. How do we leverage our data to make better more decisions, effectively, drive automation and efficiencies, and ultimately profits, right? That's why we're really in this business. How do we drive profits? So the nice thing about what we do is most of these organizations, the vast majority, have either not started yet and know they need to, or have started and have a not so great solution worked out that they know could be better. And the other fortunate piece is these industries typically have similar technologies from a source system perspective in place, right? So on the manufacturing side, You have your supply chain, you have your ERP, you have
Yep.
your customer
They're
relationship
herd
management.
animals for sure, right? I
Yes,
mean,
exactly. And then the
yeah,
same on higher education. And so for
yep,
us, the question became, how do we use that repeatability, even though we're going to see variance across what these sources are? For
right,
example, a CRM, you might have Salesforce, you might have HubSpot, but at the end of the day,
yep,
the internal data constructs are very similar. They're
yep,
called different things, and
yep.
some technologies make it harder than others to actually
Just
take
about
the
all of
data
them, you
out.
can export a CSV or some sort of data
Right.
set to
The
to get it right.
relationships are the same. You have a
Yep,
customer and they have a
yep,
name and they have
yep,
opportunities and they have activities. So
yep, yep,
we
yep.
said, how can we find that lowest common denominator and build these models in such a way to where we can reuse them? Because when you
Mm,
think of my industry grant, what we used to do as an organization is you'd come to me with a problem, and even if I had solved that problem 100 times for 100 different customers,
yep,
I still needed to bill you as though I'd never done it before,
yep,
because 80% of my revenue comes from the modeling piece.
yeah.
So why would I give that up? And so we took a bit of a radical stance and went, wouldn't it be more interesting, and wouldn't it provide better longevity and better customer tenure if we have that stuff ready to go and can provide them everything they need to get the job done?
Mm,
I feel like that is a stickier argument
yeah,
than, hey, I'm going to charge you a bunch to build this model and you're going to own it and have to maintain it. And
yep,
best of luck to you. Don't let it rust.
yep,
Don't let it get dirty.
yep,
We're just going to bring all that to the table so you can buy an outcome
yep,
as
yep.
opposed to buying our collective time to build toward an outcome.
So I think that's brilliant. And let me see if I get it, because remember, I'm the Gilligan here. But here's what I think's going to happen. Because for years, one of my favorite lines is, where there's mystery, there's margin. Okay.
For sure.
I mean, that's a fact. And what you're talking about is, you're talking about kind of breaking this traditional modality, because it we got technology that can usurp it, that can cut it off. And I forecast there's going to be a window. How big, how long, I don't know. But there's going to be those that get it and those that don't, with regards to effectively utilizing the AI tools that are emerging. And there's going to be people that make hay, at least for a time, because they're going to pump out more blogs than you've ever seen. And people are going to be, you know what I mean? There's going to be a different kind of settling out in terms of how people are really recognizing how they can effectively utilize these tools to significantly increase their productivity. But what I like what you're doing, because what you're kind of saying is, yeah, all that's going to happen. So let's just go straight to the heart of it. Because it's, I look at, like, you kind of bake it down. The water, you just leave it on the pot and it boils and boils, and eventually it's the crystals that's really of value. And that's what you're saying. It's like, all that other stuff doesn't matter. I'm not going to charge you for it. This is I like that. I think that's very cool. And are you familiar with informationisbeautiful.net?
Yes.
I mean, I got the first thing I thought of as you talk about data and data analytics. And I don't know, I'd love to hear about this. I just was talking to my wife about this. I am, like, my son refers to me as the mental mapper, because everything is visual for me. I mean, I can't even explain how furious I get if my wife cleans up my desk. And it's not because I don't love her and appreciate that. It's that I know where stuff is. I know where shit is, because I visually remember that card, or that note, or that right. And so there's different kinds of thinkers. There's different kinds of people. How do you address that with your solution? And are you doing a lot of visualization with the data, or is it more the analytics, and really baking it down to the crystals that's the magic?
Yeah, it's a great question. And and I'm going to play right into your hand of this Gen AI component, because when we first started this 3 years ago, this idea around a productized service, we'd get the analytics up and running in terms of, we have some dashboards, we have reports that are being kicked out. But then the number one question that we'd get asked by customers is, great, now what do I do about it? What input do you want me to put into the ship's steering wheel? Because you say there's an iceberg ahead, but I don't know if it's straight ahead or if it's 10 degrees off. And if I turn, am I going to run into it harder? What does that look like? And so for us, of course, right, you get stock dashboards, you get graphs and charts and all that cool, tangible, visual stuff that people really like to show off and show and tell internally. But what we have now is Gen AI agents who sit inside the environment, right? They're not exposed to the internet. I think that's a big problem for a lot of organizations. But it
we
serves
can talk
as,
about that, man, because my big issue on that has to do with being informed. There's so many. I've been presenting on this. I did a podcast on it. When you get to 100 million users in 2 months, I'll guarantee you there's a buttload of people that don't know how LLMs work, don't understand the technology, don't know it's all a guess. They're all just lemmings jumping off, and they're all using ChatGPT like that's the only one on the planet. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt.
But you're right. And so everything that we do for that is self-contained. But the idea now is, when we used to deliver these solutions, customers would go, oh, great, now I have to pay you to bring an analyst to the table. Right. And tell us what to do. Well, now we can use Gen AI that's trained on these specific modules. We call them domains. So this idea of predictive maintenance for a manufacturing group or retention for a higher education group. We have these agents who are trained in what that means, and right within their analytics suite they get from us, there is very plain English stuff going on. Hey, here are your top 5 students at risk for churn this semester. Hey, here are your two sub-assemblies that are freaking out at random times, and these are the 2 highest probabilities of going down without warning.
I was just thinking, mean time between failure and that analysis, and then with some sort of predictability telling me, right now, the way it smells, that wheel's going to burn out, or that something is going to happen. You should go take a look at it, right?
Yeah. So now it's the insights. I can look at it. I can slice and dice and filter and ask natural language questions of it if I want. But I also have these agents that are right in my face saying, here are your top 5 problems.
Right. This is starting to smoke over here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's been a fun addition to our service with customers, because they feel like they're getting a data analyst out of the box with this stuff. And maybe they have folks on staff, but then those folks on staff can look at those prompts, dive a little deeper, get even richer answers. But if you don't, it at least gives you a starting point to begin thinking about how to go about using that data for decision making.
So does it do things like, and I'm just thinking about, I've got a manufacturing process. Is there any analysis that says, hey, you're losing efficiency, or there's an excessive amount of waste, or where I can actually rejigger how I'm manufacturing whatever it is I'm manufacturing? Or I guess, I'm going to see some of those nuggets in the data, right? But I'm just thinking about, like, in the world of cyber, it's common to see the implementations of AI that say, that you can say, hey, agent, I can't get Collin connected, or his connection fails, or whatever. But it's another solution that I think is still yet to be here, that I can say, will you look at my system and tell me where I'm weak? Where can you look at my policy and tell me if I can be more least privilege
Mhm.
right? Or if where I can better implement zero trust architectures, right? Where there's a different kind of analysis. And I think that that'll be coming as more AI gets trained on these specific disciplines, right? These specific domains.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you're always going to, in manufacturing particularly, you're always going to want to have that sort of qualitative human eye of things, right? But what our system can help with is when you talk about, there's a big concept in manufacturing that I love called the theory of constraints. And the theory of constraints essentially says there's always going to be something along your value chain that's unoptimized and slowing you down. You may not know that it exists at the time because there's a bigger constraint somewhere else.
Right.
So that's what's worth solving first. But once you solve that, it's like a game of whack-a-mole. There's
Yep.
always going to be
Yep.
a constraint that pops up. So what
Yep.
what a intelligent data system can do